On the American side about the stance of the Israeli state over the nuclear talks with Iran. Of course, Israel is an important ally of the United States, and the United States has always stood by Israel in its conflicts in the region. But there are some reports that the reason that President Trump not visiting Israel while visiting the Middle East shows that there is a rift between the leaders of the two countries. I mean, Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump. But let's not forget, President Trump has already hosted Prime Minister Netanyahu in Washington in the Oval Office. So there is a good relations between them, and there might be differences, but the two countries' interests in this vital part of the world, the Middle East, overlap each other. And one good example is the freeing of Eden Alexander.
Kashaya, for the moment, stay with us, but thank you very much for that. Here we see President Donald Trump exiting the plane, having landed in the Saudi capital, Riyadh, to much fanfare, as we've seen. The purple carpet this time rolled out down the steps as he makes his way past all of the dignitaries, everybody lined up to greet him. And as we've said, no surprise really that he's chosen Saudi Arabia for his first major trip of his second term. He was there in 2017 at the start of his first term, having hosted a major summit of leaders from across the Arab and Muslim world. At that point, it was about fighting terrorism and how that they should handle Tehran. This time, though, meeting some of the world's wealthiest, most ambitious states, some of these countries which have the biggest sovereign wealth funds in the world, Saudi Arabia, and then Qatar and the United Arab Emirates as part of this three-leg tour. And there's a lot of deals to be done. As President Trump has always said, that's what he likes to do. He likes to strike a deal, sees himself as the world's best deal maker, in fact, and focusing on the kind of investment and jobs that will benefit America first, that refrain that we hear from him all the time. And he's not just come on his own. He's also brought a great number of business leaders, tech leaders who are with him, in the hope that they can sign some deals as well that could be worth more than $1 trillion. These Arab rulers, royal families, want a relationship with America. There's a lot for them to gain from a good relationship with President Trump. Well, watching this with us is our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette, who's in Riyadh as well. It's a huge amount of fanfare, a huge amount of honour being shown to President Trump, Lise.
There's a very close personal relationship between President Trump and the de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. You see them now walking down that carpet. He has given him the honour of meeting him right at the stairs as he begins his first trip, and President Trump has given him the honour of hosting him on his first stop on his first official tour. This is very much seen as a win-win relationship. There'll be lots of pomp, there'll be lots of ceremony. People may remember the first time President Trump came here as president in 2017. There were ceremonies in the opulent royal palaces. There was a sword ceremony that President Trump enthusiastically engaged in. This is a relationship which has gone from strength to strength, and it managed to survive the accusations against Mohammed bin Salman that he had personally ordered the killing of the prominent Saudi journalist Adnan Khashoggi. President Trump dismissed that, and this is really a relationship where they want to focus on how they can work together, what unites them and not what divides them.
Because let's be honest, these countries that he's visiting have huge amounts of money that they are looking to spend.
President Trump has chosen for his first official tour three of not just the region, but the world's wealthiest and most ambitious countries. They are countries with some of the biggest sovereign wealth funds. They have many massive petrodollars. And they also have personal relationships with the Trump family. It's not just the United States of America, the US government, and business and tech leaders who are signing deals. Also, members of President Trump's family have been signing deals, whether he's in office or out of office. There are deals in golf courses, in luxury hotels, and now more and more in cryptocurrency, in real estate. This is really about doing business, and President Trump has no qualms with this. He talks about putting America first, bringing jobs and investment to America. And this works well with leaders in the Gulf as well. You'll see now President Trump has a very high-profile team. Marco Rubio, the U.S. Secretary of State, Peter Hegseth, the U.S. Defense Secretary, is also with them. They're being greeted in turn by Mohammed bin Salman, the Saudi Crown Prince. Many of these leaders he's already known. They have come to his door looking for investment, looking for the Saudis' growing power in this region. Saudi Arabia wants to be seen not just as the wealthy petro state, but also as a pivotal political player. Mohammed bin Salman has been one of the most outspoken leaders about the war in Gaza, even describing Israel's war there and the impact on Gazans as a genocide. He's been very blunt about that, and we will soon find out just how much the politics of this region, the need for peace, will figure in their discussions, along with the signing of investment deals. There you see the huge portraits of the Saudi royal family. The king now, who's ailing, it is his son, the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, there's President Trump, who will be playing the major role as he does in these days. The new King Khalid International Airport, very much a design in line with this desert kingdom, the sweeping arches, the open spaces to bring in the light, to bring in some air. Very hot temperatures already rising here in the kingdom. There you go now, the first of the discussions between these two leaders.
How problematic or much of a conflict of interest is it regarded as, Lise, that Donald Trump's private business interests will probably be discussed as well, alongside those that will benefit America as a whole?
President Trump has never seen this as any conflict of interest. He's asked about it. He's asked about the gifts that he receives. He's asked about the deals that he makes. He's asked about the golf courses, the hotels. He's asked about a relationship where personal and political business interests all seem so intertwined. But he sees himself as a deal maker, and he's making deals. And the Gulf monarchies, of course, with their authoritarian style of rule, they see no problems with it as well. That's the way it was in President Trump's first term, and it is even more so in his second term. This is what this trip is all about. President Trump admires their wealth. He admires their ambition. He wants to deal with
avoiding wars. At the same time, I think the pomp and circumstances and the lavishness you've been describing, Karen, is part and parcel of the way the GCC, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates have, been part of, introduces the world to how they have their own way of doing things when it comes to having guests in their countries, but that will not take the focus, obviously, from the main concern. And the main concern is this hot zone and hotbed of conflict, whether a potential one in Iran or an actual one in Gaza, and that shadow will loom over any discussion of business. That doesn't mean that business deals won't be struck. They will. That doesn't mean that trade agreements won't be made. They will also be made. But the extent of which the bigger news will take center stage will always depend on what can be done vis-a-vis peace in the region and the implications to all nations, whether it is the United Kingdom and its interests here, the European Union, and definitely the United States and their presence in the Gulf.
We're watching pictures from the court, the royal court in Riyadh, the Saudi capital. Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, sitting there in that ornate and very luxurious setting of the royal court, relaxed, talking to Donald Trump, the US President, who has chosen Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states for his first major diplomatic trip in his second term. He's hoping, as we've been discussing, to secure significant new investment in the US in the four-day trip. He will be in Saudi Arabia. He will then go to Qatar, where my guest has been speaking to us from, and the United Arab Emirates. But we're expecting talks to continue. We haven't been able to hear any audio from what's going on in this very grand hall in the royal court. But we're looking at pictures of Donald Trump meeting and greeting dignitaries in Saudi Arabia. He's made it the first major visit of this term and of his previous term, and that really breaks with the tradition of US presidents visiting the UK, Canada or Mexico as their first major visit, coming to the Gulf, and all the diplomatic importance it is for the various situations to be resolved in the Gulf and the Middle East, as well as in Iran. We have been speaking to Nawaf Al-Thani, who was a former Qatari Director of Defence Intelligence. Thank you very much to him for speaking to us while we look at these pictures. But to Donald Trump there in Riyadh, the Saudi capital, meeting Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia by his side. Now the US President will be attending a coffee and tea service in the ceremonial blue room, and then he'll have bilateral meetings as well as there being an agreement signing. We're expecting that Saudi Arabia will buy more than $100 billion of US arms and other military equipment that is widely reported to be among the deals that Trump is due to announce on this trip. Missiles, radar systems and transport aircraft reportedly part of the package. Now, as we were discussing, the US had been a long-standing arms supplier to Saudi Arabia, but that relationship falters in 2021. The Biden administration stopped selling Riyadh offensive weapons because of concerns it had about Saudi Arabia's role in the war in neighbouring Yemen. Now, in 2018, the killing of US-based Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi was also reported to be a factor. A US intelligence report found that Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who we see meeting Donald Trump, approved the murder, but Saudi Arabia has always described this as false. But then the Biden White House resumed the sale of offensive weapons last year, saying the Saudis had stopped bombing Yemen. But the coffee and tea ceremony now in the Blue Room is underway. The state visit taking place. Donald Trump and Mohammed bin Salman taking their places at the head of the ceremonial Blue Room. I would wonder if that was the Blue Room. It is. That has just been confirmed to me inside the royal court in Riyadh. Servers going around the room filling the cups of dozens of US and Saudi officials with coffee and tea. But that is the scene there in Riyadh on Donald Trump's first major diplomatic trip of this his second term as US President. So on the agenda, there will also unsurprisingly, in these grand surroundings, be a lavish state dinner in Riyadh, and then this visit will take Donald Trump to Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. But just looking at the number of officials, Saudi officials that Donald Trump is greeting there, dozens of Saudi officials, dozens of US officials also in that spectacular blue room, the ceremonial blue room where the very most important of guests are received in the Saudi royal court. That's followed an official arrival ceremony at the court where the band played on the arrival of Donald Trump. And in the last couple of hours, it's been since Donald Trump arrived on Air Force One in Riyadh. But the greeting goes on. Queue of officials lining up to meet the President, Donald Trump. But why is Donald Trump in the Middle East? It is his first major international tour of his second term as President. A key focus of this trip is going to be securing significant new investment for the US economy from Gulf states, particularly from their state-backed sovereign wealth funds. And this is likely to help Donald Trump to signal back home that his America First agenda is delivering results. He is with the country's de facto leader, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Later, he's going to attend the Saudi-US investment forum there in the capital, Riyadh. That's going to feature CEOs from BlackRock, Citigroup, IBM, Alphabet, many other big names in the business world, trying to draw top Wall Street and Silicon Valley leaders to Saudi Arabia. He's then expected to attend a summit of Gulf leaders in the city on Wednesday, tomorrow, before he then goes to Doha, the Qatari capital. He will then end his four-day trip in the United Arab Emirates on Friday. But lots of expectations for this trip. But as we were hearing from our guest in Qatar, the importance of progress on the war in Gaza and securing some kind of cease deal, as the blockade of Gaza by Israel has gone past 70 days. Very important issue on the agenda, and one of the political issues, as well as the Iran of this four-day visit by the US President to the Gulf states, some kind of progress in Gaza to bring the war to an end. But then there's also the US top business and tech leaders also with him, and they are talking about projects worth more than $1 trillion. So certainly no lack of ambitions in this particular trip by Donald Trump. It is big in all senses, on a geopolitical front, as well as the amount of investment he hopes to bring into the US, going in different directions between the US and the Gulf states. But a very important relationship for both parties, the Royal Arab rulers that he will be meeting and is meeting now with America. And they want a relationship with him. He wants a relationship with them in many ways. And with me watching these pictures, Mike Thompson, World Service Middle East editor. Mike, it's no lack of ambition, we could say, with this trip, but it is going all out on all fronts.
Indeed so, yes. There's everything from, as has been mentioned, the big investment prospects, which President Trump has made very clear that it's America first, so he's going all out to get those. But it comes to the background of so many other events going on, the wars, of course, in Ukraine and in Gaza, and the talks with Iran, the nuclear talks with Iran. Now, all of this is coming at the same time, and it's of enormous importance, not just to the US, but obviously to all the countries in the region, many of whom the President will be meeting during this tour.
And do you detect what kind of levels there are of optimism in what might come out of this trip, particularly with regard to Gaza and sorting out a peace deal? particularly with the involvement of Qatar, which has played such a role in trying to negotiate with Hamas.
Yes, Qatar has played a very big part, along with Egypt, in these negotiations with Hamas and with Israel. But one of the biggest problems seems to be that Israel has said it won't consider ending the war until it's defeated Hamas, until Hamas is no longer in power in Gaza, so to speak. Yes, Hamas has said, look, we would be willing to release all hostages if we have the guarantee that the war would end as part of that deal. And that has proven quite an impasse. Another thing actually is that President Trump has long wanted to see normalization of relations between Saudi Arabia, where he is now, and Israel. But the big problem, again, there, is one that he's finding very difficult to surmount, is that Israel will not make any progress towards recognising an independent Palestinian state. And that is something that Saudi has said is essential if it's to go along with any such plan.
So we've got all these sticking points that are just not shifting at this particular time. Like, I wonder what you thought of the fact that that Israeli-American hostage, Idan Alexander, was released by Hamas yesterday without the involvement of Israel. This was directly between US negotiators and Hamas itself.
Indeed so, and that's something that's put noses out of joint in Israel, and there have been quite a few comments about that fact. Also, the separate deal made with the Houthis in Yemen, that they would not attack American shipping, international shipping, but it excluded them from any deal at all, and they weren't involved in those negotiations. So it's all part of really a lot of nervousness in Israel about what is going on here. But it has to be said that because of all the economic prospects for this trip with President Trump, there are many ways he could claim this as being a successful trip, even if some of the things we're talking about here aren't resolved during his visit.
Just looking at these pictures, Mike, and the grandest of settings for this, as we would expect on a trip that is talking about trillions of dollars of trade and investment and such important matters. Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia. Just explain why.
Well, he's not. He's in power for the moment. The actual king is in very poor health, and so Mohammed bin Salman has taken the helm and is effectively the power there, but not actually the king. But there's no doubt that he is in total control, and he's really quite transformed Saudi Arabia. When you go back to previous events where he was frowned on by the West for what happened in the Saudi embassy in Istanbul, Jamal Khashoggi, the killing there, I mean, that made him a bit of an outcast. President Biden made it clear that he thought that was utterly unacceptable, and when he last visited Saudi, he didn't get anything like the welcome that we've seen President Trump get with the Guard of Honour, and met at the airport by Mohammed bin Salman. So a totally different experience there.
And even with Qatar, things have changed so much. During the last term, Donald Trump's term in office, Qatar was being boycotted by its neighbours for having terrorist links and its relations with Iran.
Exactly, a big row with its big standoff with its neighbours, very serious standoff for quite some time. And yes, it was seen as a country that was promoting terrorism. And its relations with the US took a big dive following that, and certainly in the region itself. Yes, it was quite unprecedented, the row that developed there. That again, a bit like we were just talking about now with Saudi Arabia's reputation, that has recovered quite dramatically. And of course, Qatar, as we've said, has been playing a big part in negotiations over the Gaza war, and will be the next stop for President Trump. Something that would have been little unthinkable not all that long ago.
Extraordinary how things have evolved over the last few years. Let's just tell you what we're looking at. If you've just joined us, Donald Trump in the blue room of the royal court in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. He is with Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, meeting officials. There has been a long queue of people lining up to shake his hand, and now the Crown Prince is doing the same. This major diplomatic trip. It is also a major business trip, and there are many CEOs attending a big business summit there in Riyadh a little later. Huge names in the world of business lining up to talk about some very big deals that Donald Trump, this deal maker, as he likes to think of himself, will hopefully, in his view, bring about. But he's at the royal court. This is a coffee and tea service. There hasn't been much tea or coffee drinking, but there has been so much handshaking and greeting in that ceremonial blue room before a lunch with CEOs, bilateral meetings, and an agreement signing. So we don't know quite how long this meet and greet will go on for, but so we're staying with these pictures and talking to Middle East editor for the BBC World Service, Mike Thompson, who is looking at this with an overview. The Al Yamama Palace in Riyadh, home to the Saudi royal court, the official residence of the King of Saudi Arabia. A very grand setting, Mike, for a very ambitious trip.
Indeed so. There's going to be an investment conference a little later, during which President Trump will be giving an address, and his friend, his best buddy, Elon Musk, is also apparently going to be there. So that's going to be quite an event. So it's not all just teas and coffees and shaking hands in golden palaces. There's going to be some hard talking going on the finance front just a little later.
What does Saudi Arabia hope for out of this? And the other Gulf states hosting Donald Trump?
Well, they're all trying to firm up their relations with the US. There's also quite a lot of interest in defence contracts, which of course also will interest President Trump because it's very big business there, the arms that they'll be buying. And it's a time of flux in the Middle East, and I think searching for certainties like the support from President Trump is quite essential to these countries, because with Iran and the situation it's in, if that was to go wrong, there's this feeling that it would be really necessary to know that America does have their back. Having said that, there is with Saudi Arabia, there are quite good ties with Moscow as well. So it's not just everything, all eggs in one basket. But nonetheless, the US is a very, very important partner to the countries that President Trump will be visiting on this trip.
And looking at this grand setting, so many hopes on what is taking place here. To deal with what is going on in a very different setting inside Gaza, which so many humanitarian agencies are now warning is absolutely desperate. They're running out of superlatives.
Yes, that's right. And Israel and the US have a plan to bring aid into Gaza, but this would be done by private contractors, not by the UN or by other aid agencies, although the US has said if they wish to play a part, they will be very welcome. So far they've stood back and said you're sort of, in effect, you're sort of politicising aid, or in the case of some critics, militarising aid. So that's not getting better. But at the moment, the situation in Gaza, after more than 2 months of no humanitarian supplies getting in, that's sort of no fuel, no food, no fresh drinking water, because many of the wells in Gaza have been severely damaged, along with agricultural land. So it's a very, very dire situation, and one of which, obviously, if there can be a breakthrough here on this subject, that would be enormously valuable.
Many hopes are resting on this particular trip, particularly with the inclusion of Qatar on this state trip, 4-day trip by Donald Trump to the region. Mike Thompson, Middle East editor of the BBC World Service, thank you very much. As we look at these pictures, we will continue to bring you coverage of Donald Trump's visit to Saudi Arabia. There is lots more on our live page. It is updated.